Well, that's sort of the theme of book lunches, and wrote that I think when we started doing this series, and probably a little bit slightly different every time. So this episode, welcome, is the final episode of our mini-series on the great John Updike's Rabbit novels. Since this is the last episode, we're going to do some fun things and read a little bit more from his last installation, which is Rabbit Remembered. And we're going to talk a little bit. I'm going to do two things. I'm going to show some clips on the television, on the screen. I'm going to show some clips of John Updike, the man himself, discussing the Rabbit novels in 2008, shortly, very close to his time of his death, as when he wrote this Rabbit Remembered was close in the early 2000s. So, and I'm going to show some candid video clips of his family members talking about him. One of his ex-wives, I think Martha, I believe, or it's either Martha or Elizabeth, or and then his kids. And I'll show some pictures from Adam Beagley's biography of some of his family. So that's the game plan, if that's the right phrase for this episode. So I'm going to get into my chair and take a seat and, get a drink of this Think coffee. Product placement here, Think coffee. And get out my glasses. All the material, or most of the material, except for when I'm speaking as I am right now, falls under the jurisdiction category of the Copyright Act of 1976. The important clause in that act is fair use. The use of both commentary and criticism, and no copyright infringement is intended for a show like this, since this falls under the fair use category in law, and it's there's no infringement because we're commenting and we are analyzing these wonderful works of John Updike. And the clips that we show, of course, they fall into that because they're for educational purposes. Education and edification, both. Hopefully both, and that's what they're for. So that's the case. So let's look at these novels again visually. Just getting out my materials here. Make sure I'm ready. This is the world of the 1950s, published in 61, Rabbit Run. Right? Rabbit Redux is not in front of me. Where are you, Rabbit Redux? Hold on. This is fun, right? I knew there was a reason. Look at how torn this is. So this is the 1960s, 1970. It's always every 10 years he did this. Rabbit is Rich, of course, 1979. This stands out in terms of its art design, and it's a little different than some of the other ones, capturing perhaps the wildness of the 1970s. Don't know. We discussed last episode, Rabbit at Rest, the end of Harry Angstrom's life here. And we come to this curiosity. It is a curiosity because it's Updike calls it a sequel. It is a novella. I think technically it's a novella, I think. Maybe it's a bit short for a novella. I'm not sure. And we're gonna go into a little bit of depth today. from this edition, a sequel, Rabbit Remembered. And of course, I'm thinking about how to proceed, best to proceed. I never quite know everything for sure. But in the world of Rabbit at Rest, Harry Angstrom, of course, dies of a heart attack. So wouldn't you know it, how does John Updike open Rabbit Remembered? It opens up, of course. It's almost a matter of logic rather than you know. Yes, that's right. Life, folks, life is about. It's almost a matter of logic. It opens up with Janice Springer. Perhaps fitting for Mother's Day tomorrow. I don't know. I mean, Janice, of course, is a mom to Nelson, and of course would have been a mom to the baby who she drowned accidentally in the first novel, Rabbit Run. And I'll always love to dig into John Updike's prose. His prose style. Every writer worth their salt has a style. And inside that style are, and the following features are what makes it a style, by the way. Inside of that style, peculiarities, idiosyncrasies, biases, priors, preferences. Last month, of course, we saw John Updike talk about how he loves small town life. He grew up in a small town, Shillington, Pennsylvania. And there's a little bit of, not a little bit, there's a lot of that small town life. As he put it, in life lived in the middle, the mundane. And given Updike's considerable spiritual faith, he feels that he wants to, and largely succeeds in these and other books, depicting the mundane and the homely with the greatest love and attention. So you depict the mundane, the quotidian, as if it's the extraordinary. And you have as your main character, Harry Angstrom has many, many, many more problems, more flaws, more vices than most protagonists of any novel I could think of. Certainly, it's not. While at the same time being relatable and at times even likable, human, comprehensible, and understandable. And we're going to go to Janice. So let's see. He opens his novel with Janice. So let's see. We're going to have some vintage Updike here. The first person. He likes the present tense. The present tense, and this is no exception. Get out my glasses here. Rabbit Remembered. Janice Harrison. So that very first name that opens the paragraph should tell us that she has remarried Thelma's husband, Ronnie Harrison, one of the most disreputable, unlikable characters of all these folks. You know, very right-wing and petty, and we know that your host here, Mitch Hampton, on Journey of Mystique podcast, agrees with Harry Angstrom that Ronnie's not that great a guy, but he marries Janice, and so I just wanted to comment on her change of name there. Again, present tense, the magic of present tense. Janice Harrison goes to the front door when the old bell scrapes the silence. Decades of rust have all but destroyed its voice. The thing will die entirely someday. The clapper freezing, or the wires shorting out, or whatever they do. So the very first sentence, beautifully constructed sentence. This is just we could spend a whole episode on just I mean, one of these days I'm going to do an episode on on syntax, and how syntax yields and creates meaning and purpose, and all the different isocolons and all these little technical terms that grammarians and linguists invent, phoneticists invent to analyze procedures. But in any event, so there's a bell, and the bell's is faded, decades of rust. The bell has a voice, destroyed its voice. The thing will die entirely someday, as Harry Angstrom has died, and as everything passes, of course. So he's announcing to the reader. He goes on, this first paragraph. Whenever she says she wants to call the electrician, Ronnie tells her it's on his list of home improvements. He'll get to it. He likes to do things himself. Harry was all for letting other people do them. One paragraph. I feel like in that one paragraph, he lets you know things about Janice, about deterioration and the law of entropy, that Ronnie wants to be the macho man and do the fixing, not the electrician, right? He's proud of that. He never gets around to it, of course. It says he likes to do things himself, but it never says that he does things himself, right? And Harry wants other people to do them. Again, Harry's too busy or has other concerns. Second paragraph. A twinge in her hip slows her progress out from the sunny, worn kitchen. I'm going to read that again. A twinge in her hip. So you get older woman, twinge in her hip, slows her progress from the sunny, worn kitchen. So the kitchen is sunny, the sun coming in, and the kitchen's worn from the sun, perhaps. Her progress out from the sunny, worn kitchen through the dining room, whose shades are drawn to keep the oriental rug from fading and the polished mahogany tabletop from drying out, into the front room, where the reproduction cobbler's bench in front of the gray cut plush sofa causes a detour that has worn a pale path in the carpet. Vintage Updike. Let's go through that again. There's an oriental rug, doesn't want the sun to ruin the oriental rug. Got the blinds, but subordinate clauses. Subordinate clauses are so important. To Updike's style is the utter antithesis of Hemingway, the antithesis of Graydon Carter, who we covered last time, the antithesis of Raymond Carver. Those writers like simplicity and directness and readability, right? And Updike is saying, no, I fell in love with Proust and Henry James, those two above all. And this is he's planting his flag in this. So, whose shades are drawn to keep the oriental rug from fading and the polished mahogany tabletop from drying out, into the front room, where the reproduction cobbler's bench in front of the gray cut plush sofa causes a detour that has worn a pale path in the carpet. A big brown Zenith television, its top loaded with her mother's dusty knickknacks, blankly stares where her father's Barker lounger used to be. Janice's father. So the Zenith television brown. They don't sit out here and watch on the sofa like they used to. So it's telling you they don't watch as much TV as they used to. Remember, they used to watch the Golden Girls in the last instance in the 90s, or the Cosby Show or the 80s, 90s. And in the 70s, the Charlie's Angels and the this and the that. And now they don't watch it at all. I guess we're going to find, although in this novella, I think the thing they're watching, well, actually there's not a lot of television mentioned. Although they mention, Updike likes to show the neon signs or the commercial signs, and the movies playing are Blair Witch Project, Thomas Crown Affair, that not so great remake with Rene Russo, and was it Rene Russo? And it was not. I'm forgetting the name of the older Bond before this young whippersnapper took over the Bond. Craig, the dude before him. I don't know. Come to me. I once watched that remake of Thomas Crown Affair on an airplane, and I was just really, I mean, it was the in-flight movie, I guess, and I was really, you know, the old so the original Thomas Crown Affair was, of course, Faye Dunaway and Steve McQueen. Haskell Wexler was the DP on that. Norman Jewison. A score by Michel Legrand. You don't fuck with things like that. You don't. No, you don't remake, but they did. But anyway, I'll rein it in. I'll go back to this. So Ronnie likes the little Sony in the kitchen for the evening news. So always the multiple TVs, the little TV in the living room, how a lot of people live then and now. You know, the big TV in the bedroom, the little TV Ronnie likes to look at that little Sony in the kitchen for the evening news. Ted Koppel will come on and talk about, well, in this era, he would talk about, I guess, Clinton and Monica Lewinsky, I suppose, or something. I don't know. So that's kind of the thing. And he, of course, watches while he eats, it says. And Nelson, when he's stuck at home after work. Notice Updike says not when Nelson's at home after work, stuck at home after work. Has the computer upstairs that he says is more fun than television because it's interactive. So the very beginning of the computer. And as you can see in this novella, look what Updike does. He recreates the very first internet emails here. From Dad. Roy, great grades, you know, cool things are pretty cool here, Dad. I guess, you know, little excerpts of reconstructing early email. Right? Thought it'd be fun to show you that. So this is 2000, 2001. The shadow of September 11th. 9/11 is going to be over everything. In these years and subsequent years, of course. Nelson are essentially our main character here, as well as Annabelle. We'll meet Annabelle in due course in this episode. Nelson has made as a fictional character, he's made extraordinary strides. I can't think of I got it. Rereading these books now. The guy, he's a coke addict in the mid 80s, and here in 2000, he's helping so many people, counseling and doing therapy in this center. It's a job. That's his job, and he's good at it, and he's grown. It's not always the case that I want to see this in a work of art. Usually, I like characters that don't change or move that much. Frankly, I'm not a fan of classical arcs. To be honest, one of the things with which I agree with David Fincher, who I think Fincher says he never puts it in any of his films, and I have some sympathy for that. Having said all of that, when you have an arc like this, like Nelson's, there's of course value in it, immense value in it, and we'll get to that because we'll get to the way he talks about his life and talks about his mistakes and his. So that's the setting for Janice and her home here. There's somebody coming around bothering Janice, if that's the word. This strange young woman, Annabelle. I think she comes around a couple times. And of course, she comes around and Janice is thoroughly skeptical, distrustful of this strange woman at her door. I'll give you a sense of that. Let's see here. Mrs. Angstrom, that's Annabelle. Janice is taken aback. She allows. My husband's name is now Harrison. The girl blushes. I'm sorry, I didn't know that. I wasn't thinking. The girl's milky blue eyes widen, and Janice feels the stranger is actually trembling, her body a quiver in its careful, quiet clothes, a creature somehow trapped on the welcome mat. in the rectangular shade of the brick-pillared porch. So Updike doesn't just say a mat to this woman's house, Janice's house. He's got to say that this girl is a creature somehow trapped on the welcome mat. And the welcome mat, he has to add a subordinate clause here, in the rectangular shade of the brick-pillared porch. Brick-pillared porch. Behind her, cars swished by on Joseph Street with a fresh, dry sound. A shiny new brick-red Lexus stands. Lexus is the car. Lexus stands at the dappled curb under the still green maples. A cloud passes overhead, and the shadow is almost chilling. That's how you feel the new season. That's how you feel the new season. The shadows are sharper and darker, and the crickets sing under everything. With the terrible drought this summer, the leaves are turning early. Those are the horse chestnuts curling brown at the edges, and the front yards where no one has watered have turned to flattened straw. A look Janice remembers from her childhood, when you are closer to the ground and summer is endless. My God, it's great. Folks, if you're writers, copy and steal from that. That's how you describe a person in their house and what's going on with the weather. I don't know. Fantastic. All right. Enough description. We're going to have a little plot and character here. Don't worry. My mother died 2 months ago, the girl begins again, taking a breath to steady her trembling, both her hands holding the small striped purse in front of her belly. I'm sorry, Janice says. Nelson deals with crazy people at his work all the time and says they're not to be afraid of. She deals with people trying to buy or sell houses. I guess she got a real estate license. You know, the people in Updike's novels and all of his art, all of his prose, are people that do things like get a realtor's license, and that's a step forward for them. Or like Nelson, you know, they're a counselor in this center. So that's a major achievement, is to get that realtor's license. And the culture of this world, I didn't mean to go off on that is the way that I did, but I think it's important. And also her trying to negotiate. You know, who is this strange woman coming to my house? So she just deals with people trying to buy or sell houses. The most money a lot of them will ever have to think about. And they can get high-strung and irrational too. I've never married, and she was all the family I had. Annabelle says that. So she's stepmom is the only family. I mean, her mom is the only family she had. So despite her respectable clothes, this is a beggar. I'm sorry, Janice says again in a harder tone, but I don't believe I can help. So free indirect style, that's exhibit A of what that is in prose. She's not a beggar. You're inside Janice's consciousness, this damn beggar. She's a damn beggar. It's not in quotes. It's not in dialogue. It's going from character to character. This is very, I almost say primitive. This is sort of fiction 101 in a sense, but not necessarily, because for much of the 19th century, we'd have to go back to the late 18th century. You know, writers did not do that, and there was omniscient description, and then folks would talk, and that's when you would get bias, you would get personality when folks talked, you know. But you wouldn't get this, a beggar. I don't believe I can help. So she's turning Annabelle away. Her hand moves to swing the heavy door shut. Nelson is off at the treatment center, and Ronnie playing golf at the club, and some other retirees, so she is alone in the house. Not that the girl looks violent, but she is bigger than Janice, bigger boned, with a dangerous fullness to her being there. So, you know, she's afraid of this girl. You know, is this girl going to attack me, do this, do that, all the worry that Janice has. A stranger at her house. But the way Updike describes it, Annabelle has a dangerous fullness to her being there, as if defiantly arrived at the end of a long wavering, like a client taking the plunge of offering 30,000 more than she can afford. So this is Janice's, again, free and direct, internal. She's like this person I sold a car to or sold a house to. Reminds me of that, and I don't trust it, But describes it as dangerous fullness to being there. Abstract language, using both poetic and sometimes philosophical abstract words and clauses to describe a situation. It says more about Annabelle from Janice's point of view. Her eyes are set in squarish sockets, showing the puffy look of sleeplessness, and her hair, cut raggedly short the way they do it now. They mean girls, Janice's point of view. These kids today in 1997, let's say, or 98, if that's what the year is, they do this thing with their hair. They all copy Winona Ryder in Reality Bites and have hair like that. So she's doing this. Cut raggedly short the way they do is mixed of light brown and darker brown and gray strands. I don't think you can do help either, Annabelle agrees, but my mother thought she might. Do I even know your mother? No, you never met. You knew each other existed, though. Janice does wish Nelson was here. Again, her son to be the savior, right? The knight to come in and save her from being attacked by this person, right? And also because he has knowledge. So Nelson's risen so substantially. Going into recovery as he did and becoming a therapist, he's, again, as I said at the outset of the show, he's made great improvement as a character, so much so that his own parents looked to him. As it says here, Nelson could tell at a glance that this person were over the edge and give it one of those names he had: bipolar, schizophrenic, paranoid, psychotic. Psychotic, you see and hear things, and can murder without meaning it. And then in court seems so innocent. The varnished grain of the door under her hand calls out as a potential shield, and a slammed end to this encounter. But there's something pleasant and kind and calm about the girl, who is these as well as troubled and trembling, holds the door open. The dry, warm air of this early fall day in southeastern Pennsylvania, children tucked back into school. Updike doesn't say children back at school, children tucked back into the school. Tucked. The mid-morning streets quiet. The vegetables in the backyard gardens harvested or gone to seed. Lies on Janice's face as a breath from the past, her visitor having come from this same terrain. So, as you know, Annabelle is Nelson's sister, and I believe, of course, her mom was Ruth. Rabbit has a very torrid, contentious relationship with Ruth, but had a kid, And we met her as one of the nurses. She was working as a nurse in the hospital when Harry Angstrom was having his heart attack at the end of the previous novel, Rabbit Arrested. So this is the first meeting of Annabelle and Janice, and it's really a joy to read what Updike does when they're taking very mundane things and trying to create rest out of it, utmost beauty and poetry, if he can help it. And doing no less at the end of his life, because this is 2001, 2000, and he's got about 9 more years left in him, I think. And so he's at the height of his powers and at the end of his life. Updike, it's a writer. Let's go ahead and see. So Annabelle is persistent and eventually even wins even Janice over, I guess. Janice has to recognize who it is and has to make clear, Janice has to be clear that Annabelle doesn't want anything. Doesn't want any money, is not a beggar, to use Janice's internal formulation. Not a beggar, just a sort of family. Nelson's sister. So I want to read from the scene where the kids, or we Gen Xers, Nelson and Annabelle, have lunch. It's a beautiful scene. And they talk about who their parents were. And by extension, what are these novels? What are they, who was Janice, Harry Angstrom, Thelma Harrison, Cindy Burkett, the hot one, right? Ronnie Harrison, Coach Tethero. Who are these people? What are these novels? Yeah, that's the terrain that we're in now. Of course, Janice doesn't like it. There's one passage here where it says, "Why?" Janice cries. Funny back of pressure. Why not let the past lie? Why stir up what can't be helped? Excuse me, she says, I must refresh my tea. So that's just the conflict here. Annabelle makes very clear to Janice that it's not about money. Annabelle says, great dialogue here, I should say. Dialogue and scripture. No, I don't think so. I clear 20 an hour from the agency and often work 12-hour shifts. My mother left us a fair amount, even divided by 3. The farm had only a tiny mortgage on it in terms of today's money. And she held down a respectable job the last 15 years with this investments advisory firm in the new glass building downtown. So there's that new glass building downtown. Annabelle's mom worked there, so she's no longer turning tricks. She's no longer doing sex work. She's working in this finance, one of the new glass boxes. And Annabelle's making clear to her, well, this is my life. I have a decent salary. And as I said earlier, there's a connection here between Nelson and Annabelle because they both do something that involves sort of helping people. Of course, Nelson has the center, the treatment center. And Annabelle here, what does she say? She's at this agency. It's wonderful to work, Janice concedes. Women of our generation came late to it. It disquiets her to link herself with Ruth the unspeakable, holding her husband captive on the other side of Mount Judge. Ruth, the treacherous, mucky underside of everything respectable. No, it's not about the money, Annabelle says, edging herself forward on the sofa. There's some more description I'm going to skip here. I hate to do it, but we've heard from some of it. So it's not about money. It was about family, I guess. But never mind, Mrs. Harrison. I can see you'd rather not get involved. And that's no surprise, to be honest. This was my mother's idea, and she was half out of her head with the medications. Dying people aren't the most sensible often, though you'd think they should be. I did this for her and not for me, because she asked me to. So that gives us a sense of where we are. So with that, so I wanted to read from Nelson and Annabelle's meeting. I wanted to read also, very important, and Updike takes the time to include it, a section in Rabbit Remembered that shows Nelson at work with a client at the treatment center. Just to give us a sense of how Nelson is as a counselor, what the center's like, what his clients are like. So let's try to find that here. Nelson, Nelson, Nelson. You know that Updike likes to really describe in great detail the commercial aspect of Brewer, this Pennsylvania town. And I see here there's a lot of that. Here's a description of Nelson at work. Nelson's deep-socketed, distrustful eyes dart back and forth as he listens. Listening is part of what he does for a living, and he lets them talk while he fishes a Coors from the refrigerator. He is 42. Nelson's 42. He has put on weight, but nothing like Harry did. Nelson learned a lesson there. His thinning hair, dark, but with his father's fineness. Harry's blonde hair would just lift off his head when it dried from being combed. His cut so short, his skull and face are naked in their angles, like a convict's. Skip ahead here. His qualifications, it says Kent State in Ohio, a course of study at Hubert F. Johnson Community College in South Brewer. Let's see here. I don't know where the scene of him with the client falls, but I see here in 2, it's he's talking to Annabelle. Calls her up, says, "This is Harry Angstrom. I'm sorry, this is Nelson Angstrom." "Oh, Nelson, how nice." A pause. He had thought from enthusiasm she might go on a little more. He says, "My mother described your visit." "Did she? I wasn't sure it went very well." "Oh, yeah, she liked you." She isn't sure what to make of the general situation. It took her by surprise. Me too. I mean, I was surprised at first when my mother told me. It shouldn't matter my being a grown woman at all. Oh, but it has to matter. He feels more secure as the conversation tips towards the therapeutic. "How do you feel about it?" she asks. "I feel good," he says. "Why not? The more the merrier. Isn't that what they say? Listen, I was wondering if we could have lunch sometime, just to look each other over." That was one sentence too many, but then he might as well get the curiosity issues on the table. She hesitates. Why would she hesitate when it was she who had come out of the woodwork? "I think I'd like that. Tomorrow, the next day, what's your schedule?" Updike titles the place they go the Greenery, and Nelson describes it as soups, salads, and sandwiches, kind of neo-new age, but they have booths for a little privacy. Sounds cute. Of course, all of this harkens back to the 90s. Different world, the 90s, when you'd have a booth and eat a tuna fish sandwich and a salad bar, and the Greenery, places like this. Go out. Now, of course, wouldn't you know they had picked the one day in September when a hurricane called Floyd is supposed to hit. All sorts of wind damage and heavy flooding in North Carolina, and then predicted to come right up the Chesapeake into southeastern Pennsylvania. So that's something there in the description. I finally found it. Nelson at work. It'll happen. He's going to talk to the boy first and make the parents wait, or ask the parents to wait. So it starts off here. It's Nelson. "Well, Michael, how are you feeling?" he asks when the door is closed, and he is settled at his desk. His desk is of minimum size with a fake wood grain top. The young man folds himself into a one-piece molded plastic chair, orange in color, opposite. He wants to slouch to show how lightly he takes all this, but the chair in its flimsy, scientifically determined form does not permit much of a slouch. So already the overwhelming centrality of environment, this ugly, awful wood grain, that industrial, cheap, low-grade grain, those plastic chairs that fold. You've been in them in the DMV or wherever, and because of the chair is the way that it is, he can't even slouch. This client can't even slouch in the chairs. We are creatures in part of our environments, and the choices that designers made for us to a public world and what we're going to live in. So, and this treatment center is no exception, of course. So he asks Michael, how you feeling? Michael says, okay, good, the same. Voice is quiet. Michael licks his lips as if abruptly aware of a dryness. Yes. He is lying, Nelson knows, but he keeps his eyes down on the young man's folder, opened 6 months ago. Taking your Trilithon consistently? Absolutely, sir. This is another lie. Nelson can tell from a certain restriction in the young voice, a telltale flattening. But Michael wants to believe it. He wants to be cured of an illness that seems to be nothing less than himself, a rot of his most intimate ego, that voice within, where it was nestled supposedly safe in his skull. I'm going to read that clause again. Goodness. A rot of his most intimate ego, that voice within where it was nestled, supposedly safe in his skull. Any side effects from the Trilithon you want to take up with Dr. Wu? Howard Wu is the center's MD. Here are 3.5 weeks. Golden in color, stocky in form, he is much beloved for his hearty Chinese pragmatism and large convex teeth. He is their jolly Buddha. The boy readjusts his position, perching on the chair's edge and jerking forward. I feel plugged up at both ends. It's like a cold in my nose all the time. I feel sleepy all day and then I can't sleep at night. I feel shitty, he says, and titters as if to disown his feeling. A fission, a scatter in his young face makes him hard for Nelson to look at. Do you want me to write down no voices? If I do that, Dr. Wu will see no reason to adjust the medication. Goes on further. He says, what do the voices say? Nasty stuff. Nasty stuff. Nelson waits. They tell me what a miserable fuck up I am. They tell me to kill myself. Or maybe I think of that myself to shut them up. It might be worth it. Michael, Nelson says, loud and urgent enough to make the boy, whose eyes sidle and flutter, look at him. If you ever for a moment think you might follow through on these impulses, you must do what? A long pause. I don't know. You must get in touch with the center at any hour. Yeah, well, shit. I'm not apt to be calling any center at 4 a.m. The recording gives the number for emergency services. Call it. Here's the number in case. This is a long passage. I'm not going to read all of it, but you get a sense of Nelson, again, the progress he's made in his life, what he does for a living. It's not an easy job. It's at times probably, I guess, arduous, and probably also at times fulfilling. And that's Nelson's life. Okay. See how long it goes on for some time. Because Updike is so thorough and comprehensive, he gets into the politics of the kids' parents. Updike likes to let right-wingers, and a lot of his characters are right-wingers, go on at great length about their bullshit. Updike the writer indulges his character's BS, you know. I think in part to describe something about America, and also I think now, we're doing this series now at this moment in our American history, such as it is, as a sign towards the future in many respects. So I think there's a lot of that too. I mean, Updike is interested in talking. As I said, he talks about us at our best and our worst and everything in between. So all right, here we go. I found it. They're having this she's having the broccoli soup. They're at the greenery. Annabelle says something very bold to bring up a topic. Annabelle says, "Tell me about him." Who, though he knows? Our father, Rabbit. So Annabelle's saying, tell me about this Rabbit, Harry Angstrom, ex-basketball star, ladies' man, I don't know what you want to call him, different things. Annabelle wants to know, well, who was it? She's asking Nelson. Nelson shrugs. What's to say he was narcissistically impaired would be my diagnosis. Intuitive, but not very empathic. He never grew up. It occurred to me just now, passing a bunch of old guys in a barber shop coming over here, that he died when he did because he wanted to. Those of us around him were begging him not to die. Remember in the last scene in Rabbit at Rest, Nelson screaming, "Dad, don't go." It's the virtual last line of the novel. Begging him not to die, but he wouldn't listen. Nelson has rephrased Prue's sleeping with his father just out of the hospital as a way of begging him not to die. Not a bad reframe, he thinks. Why didn't you want him to die if he was so awful? Did I say he was awful? He was careless and self-centered, but he had his points. People liked being around him. He was upbeat. Since he never grew up himself, he could be good with children. Even with me when I was little. The smaller they were, the better he related. He was a better grandfather than a father, since he could clown around and have no direct responsibility and not give you a sinking feeling. He kept giving a sinking feeling. I mean, he did things too. He ran away from Mom to shack up with your mother, Ruth. He got involved with a megalomaniacal black guy with a masochistic runaway white girl and got our house burned down. He had a crush on this nitwit young wife of a friend of my parents when they were in a country club phase. Then he had a long secret affair with his oldest friend's wife. I say friend, but in fact he and Ronnie always hated each other. I mean, this is not a constructive personality we're talking about. Yet you didn't want him to die. What do you want me to say? Well, hell, he was the only father I had. What am I supposed to do? Wish him dead? Annabelle smiles. Her soup bowl is empty. Some would say that would be normal. That Oedipal crap, you mean? Freud is fun to read, but in the workplace, he doesn't hack it. Nobody in the business uses Freud anymore. But he is more stunned by her saying that than he shows. Would be normal. It's italicized. Would be normal. Would be normal. He had wanted his father to live, to continue to take care of him, to be a shelter, however shaky. Again, Updike, a shelter, however shaky. A shaky shelter. Just beautiful. Every detail, you know? Just, however shaky. There is a louder scream of wind outside. Old tropical storm Floyd. The ceiling lights flicker and then go out. At the same moment, the waitress brings her salads. "Oh," she says, "can you two lovebirds see to eat? Or shall I hunt up some candles?" We can see enough. So, Annabelle talks about her father later on in this lawn scene at the greenery. And here's what Annabelle has to say. "I love my father too," says Annabelle, "the man I thought was my father. He could fix anything. You know how around a farm everything is always breaking down. He never let on he was flummoxed, just would sigh and settle down to it. He had this wonderful, confident, calm touch. With my mother, too, when she let her temper fly. Whenever the excitable of my patients get to acting up, I try to think of him and act like he'd act." Nelson's inner ear tells him there is something wrong with this. He is being sold something. But it may be that his ear is jaded. Hearing all day about families, dealing with all the variations of dependency and resentment, love and its opposite, all the sickly intern can't get away from itness of close relations. If society is the prison, families are the cells, with no time off for good behavior. Good behavior, in fact, tends to lengthen the sentence. Some thoughts from Nelson there. Let's sit with that a little bit. "He sounds great," Nelson grunts. "Every time my father tried to fix anything around the house, it got broken worse." So we're at the point now where I think I might want to give a little taste of people's, I don't know how else to put it, I call it their BS or their problematic political opinions, which only proved in this subsequent years till now to be more and more powerful and influential over the rest of us. Let's get a little sense of this. Where are we here? This is who are the characters here? Let's see, got Nelson. I think it's Janice. This is Ronnie and I think Ronnie and Janice. Of course, Ronnie Harrison. This is vintage Ronnie Harrison. Here we go. "Look," Ronnie's voice presses on. "I'm calling to say," he's calling her on the phone, Janice on the phone, "to say you're not supposed to make it harder." "I'm not?" "Some would say that you owe the apology not to me, but to Annabelle. I don't trust myself to talk to her. Her being such a bleeding heart for Clinton still pisses me off." "Was it really Clinton that pissed you off? Tell me, Ronnie. When you looked at her, what did you see?" "I saw a bleeding heart broad, too big for her miniskirt." "Anything else? Come on, help yourself. Think." Ronnie thinks. So this is, Ronnie says, "I saw Ruth Leonard back in the 50s. She'd fuck anybody." "More. What else did you see?" Ronnie is silent, but his silence conveys less animosity than an attempt to think. This is the best conversation Nelson has ever had with Ronnie. His moving out has done that in just 4 days. For the first time, Ronnie owes him some respect. "You want me to say your father?" He comes up. with. Only if it's true. So this is Nelson and Ron Harrison talking. It's not Janice. My apologies for the phone. Only if it's true. It's true. She has more of him in her than you do. Stop asking all these damn questions trying to make me spill my guts. You're sore at me and always has been because I ball your mother. Are you sure about that? Maybe I like you for it. I can't do it. The fact is, I don't dislike you, Ronnie. You don't threaten me the way you did Dad for some reason. I like you. I like the way you take care of Mom and care about that big homely barn of a house. You're a caring guy. Insurance salesmen are caring guys, worrying about the loved ones when the breadwinner packs it in. You try to make the dead effective, just like I try to make the crazy effective. Interesting. We're not hot shots, but responsible citizens. What bugs you about Clinton is that he seems to get away with everything. The same with my father. Let me tell you something, Ronnie, something I've observed. Nobody gets away with anything. Those that escape punishment inflict it on themselves. We all do it. We keep our own accounts. So that's some perspective from Nelson. Again, I don't really want to opine or give you my feelings on. I'll say that this leitmotif of these extremist political opinions is what I'm calling it. And as we all know, even the worst political opinions have a little truth in them. That doesn't take away from them being bad opinions or being bullshit. Indeed, that little bit of truth is how they succeed in spreading, whether on the internet or anywhere else or here. So that's clear from this. Ronnie and Nelson. Notice the type here of early email. I'm just fascinated with the way. See? I've been living on Almond Street. These little. What do we think when writers do that? When writers use type and fonts to give a character of an entire era a period of time and how things are done in that period of time visually. It's interesting. So that's a taste of Rabbit Remembered. I think we're gonna get out my TV and listen to the man himself, Maestro, talk about his work and himself. 1 second. Here we go. Got to adjust some things here. Nope. Nope. Shoot. All right. This is, again, as I said, it's from 2008.
Cheever had a wonderful way of illuminating.
And I want to get the right. Scene change. I want to get
Illuminating ordinary doings in an American suburb so that they seemed rich in supernatural glow somehow came through. And I think
supernatural glow.
Some of them are obviously very good, and we need to read stories about India and Africa. We need to know how the vast majority of other people live, but something provincial and precious maybe has been lost out of the most short stories.
Speaking of sequels, which we were a few minutes ago,
Here we go.
do you ever regret knocking off Rabbit?
Okay.
Famously,
Here's the question. Basically asking the author, do you regret killing your main character?
Right? What, 56?
He was 56, but he was
56 when
overweight.
I want you to think about that. I'm 57. I'm going to be 58 in October. Henry Angstrom dies at 56. So,
And
put that in perspective.
he'd had, in a way, a hard life. When my father was falling ill, the doctor told my mother and myself, your father has an athlete's heart. He had played football and baseball, and his heart was enlarged. And so I think I felt that Rabbit, too, would have an athlete's heart. And men do drop over at 56, so fewer and fewer. It was entirely selfish. I felt I had stumbled upon a good thing with this character in this environment, which was basically my boyhood environment. The Pennsylvania-ness of it all there's a geniality and a warmth that comes through somehow from that Commonwealth that I could draw upon, and hence deciding to move on beyond Rabbit Run, age him a decade, and then another decade, and then another decade. I felt I was doing something that I hadn't done before, and that in a way I was capturing a male American life in these segments. But he was not a comic strip character. He was a mortal man, the image of a mortal man, and so you can't have him just go on and on like Mandrake the Magician. There has to be a death. He has to die before me because only I can kill him. And I thought I better do it while I was still ahead of the game. That one more fat novel about Rabbit would have only added to the same sort of trouble he already was having with his family. The boy, his war with Nelson, you could say, which animates the whole sequel, his war with his son who's 2, then 12, then 22, and then 32. The love and irritation, infuriating relationship there, which is yet the most important really in Rabbit's life, was the central element. And to have Nelson be 42 and Rabbit be 66, I couldn't see any aesthetic profit or informational profit in that. So yes, it wasn't killing him. It felt good in a way. I didn't think it would, but you need to have a sense as a writer of an ending as well as a beginning, and so that he would die around a basketball backboard as you first saw him, and that he would feel that he was winning this little game of pickup seemed a nice way to go. He is a Swede. His name's Angstrom, which means a little tiny something, and there are images of Viking mythology in the retirement home or whatever it is, assisted living. I don't know what it is. It's just the place he.
So that's interesting. Is this a retirement home? And it says he's a Swede, or which is means a little something. Just always, Updike is always attentive to allusions, etymology, language, symbol.
He winds up in Florida. It's full of Viking imagery.
Florida.
The notion of his Viking blood leading him to die in a kind of fit of going berserk. Berserk was a tactic whereby the Vikings made themselves irresistible as warriors. All that seemed to me to fit. I was nagged enough by having lost my best friend in fiction that I did write a sequel in which his ghost haunts his two surviving children who finally get to meet. So I thought that was a sequel that did no harm to Rabbit himself, but maybe wound up a few loose ends that the series as a whole had not tied up before.
When I was thinking about this evening, I was thinking how, besides Rabbit's great appeal as a character, how great a vehicle he was for kind of learning about America. And, you know, one of the great things about Rabbit...
That's Charles McGrath, so just letting you know who that is. And this is a theme that we've been presently discussing. A theme we're returning to is these novels are works of aesthetic art in prose, but they are also sociological, historical, news-conscious, news-oriented documents of their era, of our eras.
Was that he was such an enthusiast in his way. He was such a patriot. And I remember in one of the books, he says, and I'll censor it slightly, he talks about how America is the happiest country in the history of the world. And then I found myself thinking, I wonder what Rabbit would have made of America after 2001. And then I thought, then I had the happier thought, I decided I think that Rabbit would probably be very...
So, this is, I'm not gonna leave that hanging there. I'm not gonna get into so much who somebody would have been. I already told you in this episode, I see these stories in part as descriptions of the character, the psychology, the sensibility even of people who now in large part govern all of our lives. Actually, they have less power in these books because they're competing. There's countervailing, competing other forces that hold them in check. Make sure that their bigotry and their vices are not ultimately decisive. And they could spout stuff, but they can't run a country necessarily. But that's, they're bound to win in their own way, I guess. And that's kind of one of the reasons for this entire series, in addition to Updike himself and his work. So let's go to Updike's family. Now these
Peter had a wonderful way of illuminating.
These are shit. These are odd videos. This is just. I'm gonna generously play these. Just here, again, is introduce us who these people are. Mary. It's a first wife, so 50s Updike. 1950s Updike here. Mary.
Loving, very entertaining, always good company. He was able to write as well as live enjoy life too.
He was always very nice and cordial and funny, but he was always working too and concentrating on his work. The unusual part was he was always home. I mean, I know he went to the office from 9 to 1, but he was home most afternoons.
Yeah, he was a great father. He was really lots of fun. One thing about
Miranda.
one other characteristic of his profession Unlike most of my friends whose fathers went off to work and came back at 5 and yada yada, was that he was around a lot.
Updike Memories. It's a nice little. This was posted as like Mary, Miranda, and Michael together. I guess I don't know.
We
Or something.
met at a fine arts course at Harvard when I was a senior and he was a sophomore, I believe. And we it was a course in medieval art, sculpture mostly, I think. And we got talking after.
So I want us to drill down a phrase I hate, but it just came to me, and I hate phrases like it. But you know, I want to set on that for a little bit. They met at Harvard. She was a senior. He was different, not the same grade. But what are they doing? They're studying art. But you catch what she said? She says they're studying medieval art sculpture mostly. So just studying just medieval art sculpture mostly. What is the value of having had the education? Understand John Updike went to both Oxford University and Harvard University in those years. Attended both schools. What is the advantage for his prose that we've been reading these months of that level of knowledge that both he and Mary share, of course? Think about that. It's not going to only be
Class, and sometimes we'd go out for coffee, and we both smoked. And
everybody did in those days. Or he smoked.
he was a very busy student and very active on the Lampoon and getting
The Harvard
writing lots of
Lampoon.
papers for his courses. He was in the English department. And we got to know each other quite well over that spring term. And in the summer, he had to go back to Pennsylvania to work at the Reading Eagle, which is his usual summer job. And I stayed in Cambridge, and we corresponded and kept up our relationship by mail. And then I guess during the summer we began to think, well, really, we liked each other a lot.
It was kind of, you're proud of him, but it was also kind of annoying at times, and people didn't really look at you, they were looking at your famous father, who was sort of there in the background the whole time. There was some concrete advantages. I mean, his success got us to travel, got us to England, got us to the vineyards in the summers. That was the benefit, and it got us all into private schools that not everyone can afford. So there was advantages and disadvantages, we'll put it that way.
Honestly, we didn't know he was famous. In fact, he wasn't famous when I was born, although, I wasn't conscious of him being famous. I think we started to become aware as kids. I'm the youngest of four. We became aware of his fame probably when in 1967 or so. I think I was seven or six, and
So in 1967, I was born. In 1967, she was 7 or 6, so she's 7 years older than me. And that would have been, the couples period. The couples, the novel, and the sexual revolution, and later Rabbit Run. That would have been, or Rabbit
we
Redux.
were photographers came to the house. My
Yeah.
father had just written Rabbit Run.
Rabbit Run, that's right.
I think.
Yeah.
And we were photographed and put on the cover of Life magazine.
That's right.
And I think then it started to dawn on me that my father had a job that was a little bit more unusual than most of my friends.
Life changed because all of a sudden we could afford to buy things that we hadn't been able to before. And he had the security of knowing that what he had always wanted to do with his life was to write and to be published, especially by the New Yorker. So his first aim in life was to get published by the New Yorker, and that happened quite early.
So that's something Updike has in common with Graydon Carter. Not the location of their dream or their goal, but rather the fact that they have this most specific goal. If you recall, Graydon Carter from our Aesthetics, All About Aesthetics, the magazine episode from this month, Graydon Carter said, I want to live in Greenwich Village, and I want to work in Greenwich Village, not just New York, Greenwich Village, New York City, have a wife and a dog, and be the editor of a magazine. And he's saying, I want to do this as a 19-year-old. I mean, that early, you know? And of course, John Updike wants to be at the New Yorker. It's the New Yorker or bust. That's interesting, then. Specific goals.
Soon after we were married in England, spent the year in England. He went to an art school. And in the beginning, he couldn't decide whether he wanted to be a cartoonist or a writer. And after a year in art school, I think he decided that he would go for the writing part.
Both my parents wanted to keep our family pretty simple and growing up an average middle class family. My parents entertained some, literary types, so we had a lot of exposure to some other famous people. Kurt Vonnegut came to our house, and John Cheever, to name a couple of other famous writers, American writers. But no, we were really, we were not treated like royalty in any.
They weren't treated like regular people. Oh boy, travel.
When I was in fourth grade, we moved to England for the year, and rather than having, being left up to our own devices on weekends, we would travel throughout.
Do you see this tombstone here,
and probably
John?
The usual American tourist destinations and mazes and castles and abbeys. And then every vacation or weekends, we'd go to Denmark, or the Christmas one, we went to Morocco and traveled down the coast. Or maybe that was spring, because then Christmas we did go to Austria and went skiing in Meyerhof in Austria, which was nice. And we also went over to Sweden to see my father's Swedish publishers at one point. So there was that, and then at other times we traveled to the Caribbean over spring break, and he took my sister Liz, to Tokyo and Australia, and so there was always an opportunity to get away.
The year we were in London, we went to all kinds of countries, Denmark, Holland, Austria, skiing.
So I mentioned that tombstone. So this is here you go. See, there it is, John. Michael Updike securing the headstone. Here's a poem here. Why the telephone wires dip and the poles are cracked and crooked. Let me try to read this here. It's actually best, read this poem on it. The old men say, young men in gray, hung this thread across our plains, acres and acres ago. But we, the enlightened, know, in point of fact, it's what remains of the flight of a marvelous crow. So one saw each pull a song. Interesting. Updike wrote a lot of poetry as well. So he has a large family. He has an interracial family, as you can see here. With his second wife, Elizabeth, he had 2 sons here, Enoch and Kwame. Kobla is a picture of him with them. Here's Michael, younger. These different. So this comes from Adam Beagley's book, Updike. So I didn't mean to interrupt this. I'm sorry. I just kind of might play a little bit. I want to conclude this episode with a brief discussion of biography and autobiography or memoir, and the art of each in a way. But I'll get to that. I just note to myself to
Morocco and spring vacation, and Paris.
Place you should.
I said Hong Kong. But it was great for the kids, I think, even though they may have been bored around the edges or tired of hotel life.
The bulk of our traveling experience happened right shortly after my father had written Couples, and we spent the year.
So remember, Couples puts him on the cover of Time magazine. That novel was so sexually explicit, so provocative, so radical, so explosive when it came out in the mid-60s, 66, that they had to put him on the cover and say the sexual revolution or the new freedom. I forget the tagline, and such was the impact of Couples.
That year following Couples.
Yeah.
In London. And during that year, we spent a lot of time going to different countries. Denmark, Holland, France, Morocco. And at that point in my life, I'm going to have to say it was a little bit of a drag. I was a little bit too young to fully appreciate the wonderful benefits of travel. And I was often, if we drove in the car to any place, I was frequently car sick. So that was a little bit of a bummer. But I still have very fond memories of traveling, in little snippets.
We're gonna tackle divorce in a second. That's interesting. So every one of us, I will never tire or stop talking about how we're all, each one of us, you, the audience, me, Mitch Hampton, Chester, our dog and companion, Laurie Strickland, our producer. Each one of us is idiosyncratic, is totally unique. And so this daughter gets car sick, doesn't like travel. Didn't appreciate it. When I was her age, I loved travel. I didn't get car sick. So we're all different. So I think we should, even divorce is never the same for everybody. So we'll get into some. That's strange. Here we go.
Sort of shocked, surprised, sad. I think the usual things that everyone feels when their parents get divorced. And, I just assumed they had a reasonably good marriage, a solid marriage. And so when it was announced it wasn't quite a solid marriage, it was sort of, oh, okay. Mm-hmm. Like everyone, you still deal with it for the rest of your life.
Not well. I did not like that at all. And to this day, I still don't understand it.
That's a very complicated question.
Yeah.
We were married for 21 years, and we were very compatible in most ways. I think that think you'd have to, I think that's sort of a private question,
Okay.
as far as I'm concerned.
Did you ever regret the decision to get divorced?
Oh, yes. And I have a feeling he did too.
You know, if our parents were fighting all the time or there was just serious pressure in the household, it would have made more sense. But I think to a certain extent my parents just needed to experience other things, especially my father as a writer. I think part of his needing to move on had to do with his first love, which has always been writing.
Seeing the paradigm of a father who works at home and works out of the house, and produces or creates things out of whole cloth, I think that model is something I may have taken to heart. And although I work visually in visual arts and sculpture, I think that's part of it that has stuck by me, that I've learned from him, for better or worse, I may say. Working out of the home has its advantages and disadvantages as well.
Yeah, I would say so. I think my father is a realist, and his writing usually works around the middle class, the common American. For many years, the focus on my art, which is, I'm a painter, has been in that same sort of arena. I like to find beautiful things in the ordinary.
So I have not watched this yet. I have not watched his daughter discussing that very subject. What have I been talking about in this mini-series, every episode? The quotidian, and she says it, the ordinary.
So I'm a representational artist, or have been up until this past summer, and very similar to the same sort of idea that my father had for writing, I would say.
You can see here, not very well. This is figural. It looks like a lion here, a black, and then you can see this. A little more abstract here behind her. I wish we could see it better. It's the video.
Yeah. The other thing I'd like to add about my father as a writer and how it influenced me as an artist. I think I've always felt, having seen my father work and how he works and how he was committed to working a certain number of hours, and he could prioritize. I feel as though I've been given that ability to be self-disciplined and creative.
Fellow Pennsylvanians,
All right.
I present to you the 1983
I'm gonna turn
Distinguished
this off.
Pennsylvania.
And I'm gonna put these here. Just doing what I can to make it less ugly, less clear. Gonna look at these two books for a second. Mentioned this before. This is Self-Consciousness from 1988. And this is a big doorstop one from Anna Begley. Updike. And I just want to take a little peek into these books. So I just opened it up randomly to the Harvard years. And this is what Adam Beagley has to say about those years. Well, he talks about going to Ruskin in London. Asked by a classmate why he chose the Ruskin, the school, he replied, because it's always been my ambition to be the next Walt Disney. But to do that, I need to perfect my drawing. This wasn't a flip remark. Disney's Peter Pan, which came out halfway through Updike's junior year, went on to become the highest grossing movie of the year. When Updike saw it week after it opened, he was amazed by the variety of people seen around him in the theater, all evidently enjoying themselves. He was reminded of the hugely important cultural role of the animator, a universal artist. Universal artist is in quotes, and the object of Updike's envy. How Harvard had steered him away from his dream of becoming a cartoonist, but his elitist education hadn't dimmed his enthusiasm for a medium with mass appeal. Now, it's interesting. And then, if you go to that, that's a very, it's a descriptive account of this person did this person wanted this. You quote the subject, I thought this, and I saw people like this movie, and I wanted to do such and such. A little bit from the outside, though, because this is biography. From the outside. So there's passages like this. So when Updike was first married, he cast himself as the raw provincial, the inlander. His bride, with her New England background, who we just met, right? Martha, with her New England background, was by default the more cultured and refined of the couple. She was at home in Cambridge, he was not. So that's a case of this biographer going in and telling us, this is this thing. Difference between these people. This is a good biography. There's passages where the Adlai-Stevenson campaign in 1952 was a big deal for these folks like them. I remember James Garner, the actor, late actor, saying that he met his wife because they were both Adlai-Stevenson active supporters, campaigners. That era. And discussion of some of the themes in Updike. So if you come here, to this passage, this is Ed Beagley. I mean, not Ed Beagley. It's not Ed Beagley Jr. Freudian slip. Adam Beagley discussing the sexuality in Updike, which plays a big role as we've found these years. Ever since Rabbit Run, the sexual element in his writing, principally the ache of a male's physical desire, had become more and more pronounced. Wife wooing, an intimate portrait of the Updike marriage completed soon after he sent off the manuscript of the novel, is brimming with carnal energy. The narrator lusting after his own wife in a kind of hymn to domestic eroticism. Beagley knows his subject well. Let's go to Mr. Updike. So as I've intimated before, or hinted, or maybe said outright, I don't remember really. Updike chooses to structure this book, Self-Consciousness, around problems in his life, or challenges, or things, or themes, So there's one, almost like little essays of his life. And he dedicates self-consciousness to his grandsons, who we met in that photograph, John Anaf Coble and Michael Kwame Coble in 89, and so he dedicates it to them. But so for example, there's an essay just on his psoriasis. Psoriasis was a huge part of Updike's life, and having psoriasis and suffering psoriasis. So he titles that essay here, "At War with My Skin." And so if we go into that as an example, because he's Updike, he's going to write about it a certain way. Here we go. My father had psoriasis. I've discussed that before. Actually, that's why my father liked John Updike. Probably the only reason. I mean, it's a thin reason, of course, but it's a reason. Psoriasis keeps you thinking. Strategies of concealment ramify, and self-examination is endless. You are forced to the mirror again and again. Psoriasis compels narcissism, if we can suppose a narcissist who did not like what he saw. In certain lights, your face looks passable. In slightly different other lights, not. Shaving mirrors and rear view mirrors in automobiles are merciless, whereby the smoky mirrors in airplane bathrooms are especially flattering and soothing. One's face looks as tawny as a movie star's. Flying back from the Caribbean, I used to admire my improved looks. Years went by before I noticed that I looked equally good in the lavatory glow on the flight down. I cannot pass a reflecting surface on the street without glancing in hopes that I have somehow changed. Nature and the self, the two great morties of earthly existence, are each cloven in two by a fascinated ambivalence. So that's a sentence and a half there. Nature and the self, the great morties of earthly existence, are each cloven in two by a fascinated ambivalence. One hates one's abnormal erupting skin, but is led into a brooding solicitous attention toward it. One hates the nature's capitalized. One hates the nature that has imposed this affliction, but only this same nature can be appealed to for erasure, for cure. Perhaps the unease of my first memory has to do with my mother's presence. I wish to be alone with the sun, the air, the distant noises, the possibility of my hideousness eventually going away. That's from At War with My Skin. Now, getting the words out. He opens up with the Jerusalem Post of November 10th, 1978. This article, having attacked my rumpled attire after I lost my luggage. And then he has the asterisk, and so let's read what the Jerusalem Post has to say. Matthew Niziski is the author. Updike is rumpled, really rumpled. Not the studied casual wrinkles of the well-tenured professor, but crimpled necktie, creased shirt, battered jacket, accordion trousers rumpled. Even his eyes are rumpled. So that's what it said. So Updike was responding to that. He lost his luggage. This writer went on to expose my stutter. Updike has the slight slurp of a speech impediment, the sort of thing once affected by cavalry subalterns. I like to imagine all evidence to the contrary, that it, like my deplorable skin, was unnoticeable, that only I was conscious of it. Conscious, that is, of a kind of window pane suddenly inserted in front of my face while I was talking, or of an obdurate barrier thrust into my throat. So it's going to tackle his speech problems or challenges, this essay. The throat. He says, the throat. How strange that there is not more erotic emphasis upon it. For here, through this compound pulsing pillar, our life makes us leap into spirit, and in the other direction gulps down what it needs of the material world. I watched my grandmother's smoking fits at the kitchen table, and my own throat would feel narrow. Once at the age of 9 or so, I was sledding high on Chestnut Street, which slanted sharply up to Cedar Top. Those are names of streets, Cedar Top, and whose bottom block, after a snowstorm, the town fathers strewed with cinders, a thrifty method amid depression simplicities of creating a civic playground. Just from getting the words out. And of course his personal politics, his notorious essay on not being a dove, by which he means being pro-Vietnam War. And as it states here in both books, he was the only author in the late 60s, the only one of known authors, prominent authors, that had his position. Of course, he discusses Lyndon Johnson and North Vietnamese. There's a lot of stuff in here, but it's but always a Democrat. Always a Democrat. So he says, I was comfortable with being a Democrat. In my piping voice, I defended Roosevelt and Eleanor and Henry Wallace against my Republican peers at the elementary school, much as I competed in recess time soccer tussles of the A's against the B's, or enlisted in the Philadelphia Avenue troops in mock battles against the Second Streeters. A war was going on, and political differences, however shrill, were submerged in our common identity as young Americans doing our bit to defeat Hitler and Mussolini and Hirohito. The Republican Party was that of the rich, or those small businessmen who, like Artie Hoyer, for some reason identified with the rich, whereas the Democratic Party was that of the common man, of the unrich. Interesting. So there's this little connects to the Adlai Stevenson stuff. So that's not being a dove. Sometimes in life, though, you want a text that's inside, thoroughly inside, like this. And sometimes in life, you want a text that's outside, more external. And maybe you want to add the internal, what I would say, the internal guesses or intuitions yourself as the reader. These are different, really, after all, different forms entirely. Different forms of prose. There's even a whole letter to his grandson, so I'd mention. Beautiful. I'm going to just read the first sentence. Dear Anof and Kwame, we are all of mixed blood. Your mother, my older daughter, is fair, descended from the people of Northern Europe with its mist and fog and snow. She is English, with a dash of Russian and French on her mother's side, and German and Dutch on mine. Your father is black, the pure black of West Africa, his color sealed off by the Sahara from the north and by the breadth of a continent from the infusions of Arab and Hamitic genes that have rendered East Africans comparatively pale. Genealogist tells us that we are all cousins with common ancestors, surprisingly few generations in the past. But when the strains that meet in you, sorry, let me start over in the past. But when the strains that meet in you last met, it must have been early in the history of the human race, when men were outnumbered by lions and tigers. Your two parents are about as black and white as people can be, and that helps make them a beautiful couple. But they are beautiful too for sharing similar temperaments, both being good-natured and nurturing and artistic, and similar backgrounds coming as both do from the international race of teachers and artists. Your grandfather is an internationally known ceramicist, and your white grandmother paints pictures that hang on your walls. Your black grandmother, like your father and my mother's father, John Franklin Hoyer, after whom I was named John, just as John Anof was named John after me, is a teacher. We all are. That is, people who are at home with pencils and paper, with the tools of education and art. There must be warriors and hunters in our background, as there are in everyone's. But by the time I appeared, the Updikes and the Hoyers had become peaceable, reasonable people who valued civilization and trusted it to offer them a niche. So that's his letter to his grandsons about race, and you note his description of what's important about being a teacher and an artist isn't necessarily this or that work that they might create, or this or that schoolroom or classroom they might teach, but being comfortable around paper and pencils. So it's about the texture of the paper and the pencils and being at home with such things. That is important. And on that note, I think we will conclude this last episode of Journey of an Aesthete, John Updike mini-series on the rabbit novels, and I look forward to upcoming guest J.O., wonderful illustrator and cartoonist from South Carolina, in a week, and more treats to come. And please subscribe and like our shows, and come back for more. Thank you for tuning in. Have a great weekend, and happy Mother's Day.